Welcome everyone to Season 3, Episode 7 of the Helping Children Learn podcast here at the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit number 21, servicing the 14 public school districts, charter schools, and private schools in Carbon and Lehigh counties. Today's topic is about having fun in public. As we start to take our families out more, there's a lot going on. When we go to a farmer's market, a birthday party, or a graduation party, or any party for that matter, or maybe going to the grocery store, there's lots of stimulation and input that can be a little too much for some of our special needs children. And I'm here with occupational therapists Lynn Wendling and Dana Smith. How are we today?
We're doing good. Good, thank you.
I was told before we start, you two present a lot together. What do you guys present together about?
We started. I have been here a long time, and my other cohort resigned because she retired. And So Dana, I drafted to be my new BFF. And so we did a few sensory ones for preschool together. I'm sure we will probably be asked to do more, but that's where we're at right now.
So we had a very large conversation before we even started this about how a child perceives a public space. And today we're specifically talking about very small children, preschool in early intervention. Is that correct? Ages 3 to 5?
They can go up to 6 if they choose an extra year.
So like I said, what we're talking about today is small children or special needs small children in public spaces. And my first question is, how do these things and activities and ways that a family can, enter these children into a public space, how does this help children learn?
So when we're talking about learning, we're all human, no matter who you are or what your need is. We all have needs, but you learn through your senses. So if I say the word apple to you, most of you either probably are thinking about taste, smell, or the sight of it. So you learn through those 3 senses right there, or how you hear the crunch of an apple. But that has meaning because of your senses, not because I just said the word apple to you.
Right.
The word, the sound, and the linguistics of it didn't mean anything because it only meant something because how you interpret it. So sense is how we learn. And you also learn through doing those things. And the more you do things with different senses is the more it will imprint into your brain. So children need experiences in order to learn. And oftentimes our special need kids are reluctant or unable to get those, or they're in such medical situations where they haven't had opportunities, and then they are delayed because of not having those opportunities to learn through their senses. So we need to provide them for them.
Dana, how would you interpret what Lynn just said?
I agree with what she just said. It's all about the experiences, but then with some of our special needs kids, the way they perceive through their senses, sometimes it's too much or too little, and they're not perceiving the way they need to make it a meaningful experience.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of talked about the grocery store, right? And how maybe a child's first time, they're in the grocery cart and a parent says, I can't believe they didn't do the whole grocery trip with me. They couldn't handle the whole grocery trip. And that's where we talked about levels to this, right? So can we talk about starting small and, introducing public spaces to a child in doses?
Mm-hmm.
The best way to do a grocery store is to start small, maybe just go in for a few things, or even just go in and out to get them used to what a grocery store is like. There's a lot of light, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Physical, animate objects. There's a ton of them. Yeah.
But the other thing that can be good for a grocery store is to let the child feel like they're in control by letting them choose which direction you go, or give them pictures of things that you have to find. And you can control it by the way that you go to find the things that need to be found to make it a more successful experience, because then they feel like they're involved and they're busy, so they're not becoming overstimulated.
I think also lowering your expectations. Like, not every trip is going to be successful. So being willing to maybe cut your trip short if you have to.
And just mentally preparing yourself for that in the car to say, hey, This might only be 15 minutes versus the 45 to an hour that I was expecting, and being okay with that, right?
Right. Get your groceries delivered or do a pickup if you have to. We now have those options where years ago we didn't. So you can kind of strategically manage this.
Even just a few years ago, we didn't have these options.
True,
like Giant
right.
Direct, for example.
COVID.
You can avoid that all entirely.
Right.
Or, like you said earlier, go at an earlier time when there's nobody there.
There's no better time to go
And
to
it
Wegmans
makes
than
it-
7 in the morning.
It makes it faster to go through the store and less of a overwhelming experience.
And the child then had a successful experience that you can build upon so that they're looking forward to going to the store.
Taking a child to a grocery store at like 1 o'clock on a Sunday just sets them up to say the grocery store is an awful place.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never want to go back in. You've just destroyed the scaffolding
Right.
that you were trying to, work on.
I think the other thing is doing a social story before, saying there's going to be other noises, or even showing them pictures. Some kids are averse to smells, like realize those things because you do know your own child. What sets them off? The other thing is don't go when you're having a bad day. How you are, if you are not calm, your kid could be a problem, have issues. You should not be going because they already know where you're at. So you need to be aware of your own self before you try taking your child in to teach them something that you're not doing very well yourself.
Yeah, I can see that. One thing you said, Lynn, before we started was, and this is for anybody, but no one can learn under a fight or flight. You talked about the big saucers. Can we just talk about, when you're taking a child into a grocery store at its peak busyness, it's just not a place to be able to have a child understand anything.
Right. So if you are, and we, as OTs, we talk about interoception, what you feel like on the inside of you, like when you're upset, your stomach hurts, or you flip over to a protective fight or flight. So you just want to get out there and make sure you're safe. So if you take a child into a grocery store and they're not used to it, they go into what they call fight or flight, and they are just looking around, just trying to survive and trying to escape. So you are going to get a behavior because they are not calm. And now I'm not sure quite how to put it, but they're just ready to scream. And if you have a total meltdown, it would be totally understandable because they can't control it anymore. It'd be the same as if you had somebody coming up and trying to injure you or somebody comes to steal my purse, I'm going to fight back probably. So it's kind of
it is the same emotion that they're putting.
You have a huge we call this big emotions.
Yes, it is a big emotion getting your purse stolen. That's how they feel.
Or like something else, like somebody does something to you, or or grab, or just taps you on the back and you're not expecting it, or it's a big emotion. So what does a kid have options to? They also, most of the kids with disabilities, when you have those big emotions, you lose the ability to speak usually. So what do they express? They're going to throw down, kick, hit, bite, and do all those things and scream because they're losing it. They're scared and angry.
They're communicating.
And they are communicating, get me out of here. And you're like, I got to get the milk.
I think the milk's going to wait another day.
But some parents feel that, and then the other parents feel the pressure of everybody is watching me. And I think you're also feeling like, am I going to land up on Facebook or a picture or what? You mean like, that's scary.
Lots of social norms that we're trying to.
For people.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do?
Yeah.
I try to avoid that.
Yeah. And you even said a child's pupils dilate so that they can take everything in.
You get widest saucers because you're in protective. You need to see everything around you to make sure something's coming to get you. So if you're out in the middle of the woods and you hear a bear growl, you are looking all around trying to figure out so you're safe to protect you for survival. Yeah. So the kid's trying to protect itself with all these big people, loud noises, and all this movement, and they're scared.
And this is why you really, to go back to where this all started, starting small, and maybe your fifth trip to the grocery store is peak Sunday, Saturday. Maybe your first is, 8 o'clock on a Monday, or whatever the best time is.
Or to a really tiny store. Go to the drugstore.
Yeah.
at 8:30. Walk in, walk out.
So we want to get into now that, the weather's beautiful right now. It's going to be 70 this weekend. So it's going to be fantastic, and it's going to get into the 70s and the 80s. And, we're going to be taking our children out. What are some friendly things parents can do with their children as the weather gets nicer?
The park is always a good place.
Go when it's not crowded.
Right. But at the park, they're going to get lots of proprioception and lots of
vestibular, and there's a lot of textures and sensory, and there's other kids around that they'll get to see, and noises.
So it's always a good place, and they can kind of be free to do what they want. So that's always a good place to go.
I try to pick smaller parks sometimes, or less crowded type parks. A hike, a walk out in nature. The fish hatchery is always good. If you have enough people to watch, to make sure they can't get in the water, but there's places to walk. You could feed the fish. You can be next to other kids.
The Trexler Nature Preserve is like that.
Right. That's
too.
another
That's a
very
really
good one.
Place.
There's a water park up in Grange Park you can pay for that's actually fenced in. That splashes, where you can do splash type activities. Pay for, I think, the whole summer.
Yes, they do.
And libraries have sensory days. So does the museums. Crayola. Parquette's, I think, does. So there's a lot of places. On a rainy day or a really hot day, bowling's a good thing to do. They have the ramps, as long as you've done the social stories and pick the time where it's not loud and all the music playing. You need to be just strategic about it. And then I think the other thing we talked about is like birthday parties, which can be extremely stressful.
Yeah, so that actually goes into one of the questions that I have is, what are some things that neurotypical people can do to be mindful and respectful to children with these issues? If you're going to have a birthday party, and someone with a certain disability is coming, maybe is that what you were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are some things that I can do if I know the neighbor's kid doesn't do well with loud noises and firecrackers and all that stuff that comes with birthday parties, graduation parties, any party?
Have a place that they can go to get away.
That's the number one.
To settle themselves. Have planned activities so that it's not completely unstructured.
I think also maybe in that situation, contacting the parents, say, are there certain things that that they really struggle with? And then maybe trying to, an alternative, or that maybe mom could provide a social story that this, or let them know beforehand they can go inside for the fireworks and then come back out and join you. Or breathing headphones. Food-wise, you could have an issue too. So maybe you want to talk about, what you're having, and is there a better way to present it? And games, making them a little bit more maybe joint cooperative type games. The other thing you need to look at, though, too, for going outside is like, especially in summer, did you put suntan lotion on your child? Did you make sure they were hydrated? Did you take those snacks along? Because if we're not okay inside, your output is not going to look good when you're where you are trying to go have fun together. Do you know what I mean? And this suntan lotion could be a form of deep pressure. When you put it on, it could be a sensory preparation tool. So if you have a really hyperactive child, have you given that deep pressure? Have you done the vestibular before you even get in the car to go? Have you done the pre-work? Which sounds strange, but you might need to do prep work to get to where you want to go so it's successful.
As a father of an 8-month-old, there's a lot of prep work.
But you forget that when they get to be toddlers. You just put them in the car seat.
I'm
and
sure you're
go.
right. I'm sure you're right.
Where our special need kids still need it. It's
a visceral experience for me. My wife and I are looking at each other. Do we have this? Do we have that? Do we have this? And if we don't, I'll turn around. If I'm at the bottom of the hill only, I'm going to turn around to get it. So I understand that.
But I also think it's important. The more you talk about what you're going to do and what's going to be there, the more prepared they are for the transitions that are going to happen while they're there.
I also think if you work on those preparations, you are more prepared and more calmer, and you've done it. Yes. And your
oh my gosh,
your level of anxiety or calmness is more important than you realize.
And when you're confident in the plan, you are calm.
Right.
So no one expects that you even have a question in your mind like, oh, do we have this? Well, of course we have this. Because you know.
But the child can read that, especially our children that don't have language, because they need to read that because they're not going to be able to respond.
They're very
and
empathic.
Advocate. Yes, because they can't advocate for themselves.
They're just going off of vibes and feelings.
Off of you. So you actually could be the reason why we are not being successful.
Yeah. So how we end every podcast is how Dr. Coons calls our small W's or our small wins. And this is about a heartwarming story that maybe makes you proud to be in this field, a lesson a child or a parent took and they ran with it and they really did well with it. Maybe you have a story that deals with a student, persevering in a loud public space. Like I said before we end the podcast, is there a story that really keeps you coming back every day? And it could be one, it could be a theme that you see, it could be anything.
So part of my job is I'm split between school age and preschool. My preschool is doing children who have really complex bodies. So that would mean you could be in a wheelchair, you could be blind, deaf, trached. You're generally not walking. You generally aren't talking. You could have had seizures, just many issues.
Multiple disabilities.
Multiple. We are a small class, but it's very intense needs where you actually do need a medical person to even pick them up and figure out how to sit them so we can keep them safe and we can help them progress, because most of those children are locked inside their bodies. They understand everything. They feel everything. They want to communicate, but most people just see them as they're very cute, but they're not babies. They are 3-year-old toddlers just like any other, but they're not perceived that way by everybody else. The other thing is you're also looking at a family that's been through a whole lot, because when you have a baby, you think you are going to have a typical baby. And sometimes life doesn't happen that way. So we need to see the child as a celebration and celebrate their small goals or big goals. So the child we got was not walking. He was trached. He had a lot of feeding issues. He couldn't talk, but he didn't even sit up. The sad part about the story is a child is part of a family. The mom was dying of cancer. Dad is working full time to pay for bills to survive. And grandma, who can barely get around, is helping, and they are hanging on by a thread. They were willing to let us have him 4 days a week, which is a huge gift, because would you want to trust your child to go on a bus where they can't speak? You don't know the people. They are going to have your child for 2.5 hours and then send them back home on the bus.
That's a serious trust fall.
It is, because that child can't tell you if anything went wrong. So if you start to really think about this, we are entrusted with the lives that are most precious thing. And for that mother, that is why she was hanging on to see that child. So we had him. It was challenging because he wasn't moved around that much. So even to touch his hands, he refused. He would put no weight on his feet. He would not sit up because he never had those typical experiences because of all the medical care he had. So now we are going to introduce touch, which is going to make him upset, and he's going to cry. But if we don't, he's never going to learn to experience this world. So we do that gradually. And unfortunately, Mom did pass while we had him, which was very difficult for everyone, and him. You could tell the difference. But we had great social work. We had great support staff. Dad hung in there, did great with being as supportive as he could, staying in contact with us. So after about a year, we're getting up to like the last year, he was getting better. He could sit up. We were putting him in an adaptive walker. Still has a trach in, so he can't talk to us, but he is starting to use some switches to answer. You do know when he's happy. You do know when he's upset. He's holding. He's doing messy play. Like, we are like ecstatic. And then comes time they're going to take out the trach, which means he'll get to talk. because he was actually pulling out his own trach, which he thought was hysterical, which was not, but like they're typical 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. And then when they do that, you got to cheer, even though, you're like, I can't believe he did that. But then it's like, yes, he could. So let's be thankful. So eventually we get the trach out. He comes back. The little guy actually walked out with us and was actually making sounds to indicate, yes, no, not talking, but he was happy walking, and we sent him to kindergarten walking out the building. So that's success. And when that happens and he was happy, you make them do difficult things even though they don't like it. It's kind of like when you go get a shot at the doctor, you don't like getting the shot, but you know it's going to help you. But it's really hard when they're really cute. A kid's been through all this. You still have to make them do the hard work. In the end, he would still come up and hug us, even though I was probably the cause of a few tears here and there. And typical kids would do this when they're little and they would never, it's no big deal.
Right.
But now that you have the cognitive abilities and it, so then your sensory system is increasing, it is a big deal. But you still have to go through the hard work to get to the other side.
We just take for granted just getting up in the morning, putting our shoes on, walking out. So when we're talking about sensory, he really started from the beginning. Well, I'd say you two started from the beginning with this child.
Right. And he was, for his own sake and his mom, so that he was in a crib, except for the days we were in in a darker room, a quiet room. He was, he couldn't sit up on himself. She couldn't help him get up. Dad had to work. But in the end, it was okay. So that would be probably my success story that's
amazing.
So it's moments like that. And when he walked, we all just stood up and we cheered, the whole team, because it is a team. It's not just me.
Right.
We have PT, OT, speech, vision, hearing. I mean, like a teacher, aides, we have everybody.
Like the entire IU came through for him.
Yeah. And the social worker, they were going back and forth. And we, even transportation, trying to figure out how we can get, because we need a lift van. We need more than it's not just getting a school bus. I need a lift van. I need to get him up and down. Yeah. And so those are the kind of kids that I'm usually assigned to. Yeah. We're just there to help support the family and the kid, because the family actually, if you don't take care of your family, your kid, we only have you 2.5 hours a day. I need a family. So you need to support the whole group.
Ladies, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate your time today. This is season 3, episode 7 of the Helping Children Learn podcast with Lynn and Dana. Thank you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.